What's going on, everybody? Welcome to the first On the Contrary of the season. I'm Dave Loughran, taking over for Chris Spags, who did a fantastic job last year. But you know what? Things happen, people move on, and people move in. So I'm here with you Saturday, going to be every Saturday through the 17 weeks of the season and into the postseason as well. And your regular Alex Baker, Awesemo himself. You might know him as the #1 ranked DFS player in the world. But we got an exciting show today because, he's got some competition. Got Steve Buzzard with us. You might know him as the Colts. Did I pronounce that right, Steve? Is that how it is? The Colts.
Yeah. I don't know if there's a real way to pronounce it, but that sounds good enough to me.
You never know, right? There could have been some crazy pronunciation and I've gotten it wrong, but nevertheless, Steve's the 2018 World Fantasy Football Champion, the Millie Maker winner, a single Millie Maker winner, not every one of them, obviously. Multiple six-figure wins and live final appearances. You can check that out. It's his bio. Follow him on Twitter at Steve Buzzard. Follow Alex at Awesemo DFS and myself at Loughy_D, LOUGHY_D. Steve, I'm happy to have you with us to do the first show of the season, the inaugural On the Contrary. We're less than 1 week away till the start of the year. With all of this stuff that's happened in 2020, we're getting football. It's almost here, and I think we should all be pretty stoked about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I am super pumped up. One week from now, we'll have already had the opening night game, right? So we can't wait too much longer for that. The showdowns have been a lot of fun. So if you guys haven't done the showdowns yet, make sure you're catching that here on Thursday and all throughout the season as well. And right now, though, everyone's in full season draft mode too, right? So super happy and excited to talk about some of that too.
Yeah, and Alex, Steve just mentioned you have a monster showdown slate, Millie Maker Showdown on Thursday. This should come as no surprise. DraftKings was going to do this from the beginning. We knew that. But you've got one single game, Millie Maker, 150 entry max. Is this something you think an edge can be found with? And by the way, for anyone just joining, welcome. We're happy to have you with us. Hammer that thumbs up button as you walk in the door. And if you haven't subscribed and hit that notification bell yet, it'll serve you well when you do, because we're going to have a ton of content coming down the pike. We've got an MMA show coming up after this and a whole lot more every single day on the YouTube Awesemo platform. So, Alex, before we get into some of the biggest question marks of the year, there's a lot of them. We're going to talk about some of the teams people are sleeping on, maybe the most overlooked teams from a fantasy standpoint, from a quarterback, receiver, tight end, stacking standpoint, and a whole lot more during the next hour. But I will ask you, because Steve brought it up, with these Millie Makers, with these showdown slates, and being that it's a $3 million prize pool, 356,000 entries, is there an approach you take to these showdown slates that you think can give you more of an edge?
Yeah, I mean, the showdown slates are really interesting because it changes everything when everyone's picking from the same 20 players instead of 32 different teams. And that really creates an interesting strategy, especially in football, where they let you take defense and kicker as well as the position players, and they don't force any positions on you, so you can kind of pick and choose. That kind of creates all these different correlations you can play around with and a lot of strategy. And of course, with 350,000 people and a limited player pool, there's going to be a lot of duping. So trying to figure out an angle that no one else is on, that's a lot of the fun too.
All right, Steve, let's dive into it. Start with a team that is amazingly getting a ton of attention over the past month for myriad reasons, but also a team that most people don't anticipate being very good this year. It's the Washington football team. They have one of the lowest win totals on the season, but the shakeup in the backfield is what has really turned a lot of heads. And I was doing drafts in May and June, and if you were looking at this backfield, it's entirely different. Darius Geis was actually a solid 8th or 9th round guy who you thought, hey, if he stays healthy, you can get great production from him, because Adrian Peterson is losing the battle with Father Time after all these years, and they don't really have anybody else. Fast forward a few months later, Darius Geis gets cut from the team, and Adrian Peterson is also released, leaving us with rookie Antonio Gibson, who was used almost exclusively as a pass catcher at the collegiate level, and now it looks like he's going to have an opportunity to play a huge role in the backfield as a rookie.
Yeah, absolutely. So Antonio Gibson is, and you've really seen the ADP of him change a lot too, right? So with with these news, probably back then I wasn't doing too many drafts back when you were talking about that. But when was Antonio Gibson going off of the board back then?
Oh, real late. Probably.
Maybe not even a thought.
Yeah, probably anywhere between 14th to 16th round. Darius Geis was probably 8th or 9th, and Peterson was going a little bit early. He was going in between them, maybe 13 or so. But that early in the season, there's no real consensus. That's kind of all over the place, you know?
Right. So that's one really interesting thing in some of these big best ball season-long leagues is if you draft early, you have an opportunity to get an Antonio Gibson in the 14th round when he's going more still a little bit all over the place now, but it seems like it's getting kind of narrowing down to that 6th, 7th round type thing. So one thing I like as a best ball strategy is to draft all throughout the preseason. So I didn't do a super great job at that this year, but that's something that I highly recommend for a lot of people if you're doing a best ball drafts. Personally, for me, Antonio Gibson's moved up too far in the rankings at this point. He's definitely got a strong hold on, at least it appears so right now, on what the running back opportunities will be in Washington. But the offense is just so dicey, and I don't know how much he can really, contribute, and will they have the right game scripts throughout the year. On top of that, if you are doing some of these season-long best balls, you're playing against people that drafted Gibson way earlier. So one thing that I like they were able to draft him way later and get him at a much better price. So you're already in the hole against him. So I like the idea in situations like that where a player's value has changed a lot, just to fade them and hope that he's not that difference maker instead of overpaying and playing against somebody that you're at a disadvantage against.
Yeah, and kind of segueing that into a DFS take on this, Alex. DraftKings changed it up a little bit this year. Minimum salary at running back is $4,000, where minimum salary for wide receiver is $3,000 and $2,500 for tight end. That was the case last year, but I believe running back was also $3,000. Now it's $4,000. Kind of interesting, and I'm not sure. I don't even know if defense special teams has a floor. I remember getting below $2,000 last year. But here's the thing with Gibson. He's priced at the floor. He's $4,000 on DraftKings. It's as low as you can get at the position. I know we don't have ownership yet. Totally understand that. But based on everything Steve just said, and talking about maybe just fading him in best ball with his ADP rising, from a DFS angle, he's going to be – I cannot think of a way that Antonio Gibson isn't dramatically over-owned in a spot like this. And I'm not, it isn't to say he's not in a good spot. I think he'll be used as an extension of the run game quite heavily, even if they're playing from behind. Chris Thompson was frequently used as a pass catcher, and he's gone. So I expect him to be used a lot. But if Antonio Gibson ends up being the highest-owned player on the slate, and I'd be shocked if he isn't, how do you approach something like that? I know we don't have the numbers quite yet, but it's fun to take a little look at it from a week out.
Yeah, I think that there are a bunch of question marks about Antonio Gibson. Like, there's no question that he's probably the most talented back in Washington. The other guys are Bryce Love, who he was kind of a higher draft pick too, but then he had a lot of injuries in his rookie year. And then we have Peyton Barber. He's our classic guy that gets rushing attempts and doesn't do anything with them. And I'm just a little bit worried that people are putting the cart before the horse on Antonio Gibson, where maybe his usage won't be quite as high as they hope. And you really need it to be high because Washington, as Steve was saying, they're one of the worst offenses in the league. So I definitely don't feel like you need to have Antonio Gibson in DFS or best ball. So I might play it a little bit more cautiously than some other guys. But from what I understand, I mean, he's a really talented guy and someone that it's definitely a lot of fun to put in a lineup. I just don't know if it's fun with the ownership you're describing.
Oh, yeah, no question. And Steve, the Reds, the football team, sorry, that's going to be an issue. Bear with me. It's going to be a problem. I still call the Chargers the San Diego Chargers, so it's just going to happen, and we're all going to have to deal with it. The Washington football team has an implied total of 18.5 for Week 1. Even if we're just taking zooming out, kind of take a 30,000-foot view on this from a strategic standpoint, while I have somebody like you and Alex who have had an excessive amount of success in the DFS realm, how do you usually approach something like this where, let's assume Gibson is going to be wildly popular? I think we all agree he will be at that price. And the Redskins have an 18.5 implied total, one of the lowest on the slate, against an Eagles defense who, against the run, was spectacular. Pass-catching running backs have had some success, but overall, it's a pretty ugly spot. How would you normally approach something like this, using Gibson kind of as a case study or as an example?
Yeah, so in general, especially at a cheap running back, I think that's going to get a lot of workload. I'm going to probably be pretty heavily owned on him, even if he is fairly heavily owned.
Yeah.
Kind of what Jalen Samuels was a good example of that last year as well. I think he was around 60% owned. I don't know that Antonio Gibson will get nearly that high. I guess we'll have to see as we take a look at things. But
wasn't that the game, by the way, that Samuel had like 2 rushing yards and 20 points receiving? I think it was.
Yes. I was a bit under the field on him still in that situation. I was just a lot of the stuff went right that that fade could have helped out on, but just too many catches, unfortunately.
I think that game's a really important example because the reason he got 2 rushing yards is because everyone was expecting him to be every down back, Jalen Samuels, but then some dude you'd never heard of, I think it was like Harith White, jumped into the starting lineup, and then Jalen Samuels was on the field like half as much as people hoped. Yeah, I definitely see that as a potential for Antonio Gibson this coming week.
Was it not Benny Snell? Was it somebody? Maybe you're right. I guess it was someone we have no idea who it was.
Yeah, because Benny Snell, we kind of know like that guy would be on the field. Everyone was expecting Jalen Samuels. The whole depth chart was out. And it was kind of similar to now because Peterson got cut, Darius Geis got cut, and now none of the guys from the roster last year are playing. So it's really, you have to dissect like the coach speak to really understand the situation. And even that isn't very reliable.
We're going to whip around the league here a little bit. No real format, just hitting on things that we think are important heading into week 1. Look, we still have some time, but it's always good to get your footing a week out, get some opinions, formulate your own opinions, and then throughout the week, put the research in and come up with something you like, whether you're crunching or fine-tuning your model, you name it. All of that still going to take a little while, and we're here to help facilitate that process. Steve, before the show, we all discussed a couple teams we wanted to hit on, and one of them was the Colts from you. And interestingly enough, I think this is one we need to spend some time on because they've got Frank Reich, who is a very good coach, somebody who took someone in Jacoby Brissett last year, knew he wasn't particularly good, and found ways to work the offense around them. I'm not saying it was wildly successful, but it could have been a lot worse. T.Y. Hilton missed a lot of games. Brissett didn't throw the deep ball to him, made life a little bit difficult. Now you've got someone like Phillip Rivers, who his deep ball was shot last year, but he never hesitated to throw it. He still threw for 4,600 yards. Keenan Allen still had a big year. Mike Williams had the quietest 1,000-yard season you'll ever see. Austin Eckler was productive, and Hunter Henry was pacing a tight end 6 performance in fantasy. So how do you envision this offense working this year with no Eric Ebron? Jack Doyle may be working himself into a bigger role, and T.Y. Hilton coming back healthy. Seems like this team's going vastly overlooked pretty much everywhere.
Yeah, absolutely. I am really excited to see what they're going to do. Brissett was not really the great quarterback that you want leading your team at any point last year. And everyone is down on Rivers too. And I get it. He's getting older, but like you said, he actually had 4,600 yards, like you're saying. His yards per attempt weren't really that much different last year than what they have been in the past as well. What everyone really just remembers is the turnovers late in the games that cost them a chance to get into the playoffs, and they figured because of those turnovers, Rivers was washed. But in reality, I think there's a lot of underlying signals there that'll help the Colts and Rivers be successful, especially with Reich as well. So I do think that T.Y. Hilton should continue to get used quite often, maybe not quite as heavily as Keenan Allen. He was peppering Keenan Allen nonstop, but I would expect T.Y. Hilton to get a lot of usage in this offense again. And the offense has really gotten a big upgrade as well, right? So, Paris Campbell should be back and healthy. The Colts spent a second-round pick on him 2 years ago now, and Michael Pittman as well could see a lot of upside with a high draft pick on him also. So, I think that both of those guys, are hardly being drafted at all or super late. Regular season leagues, no one's really paying attention to them. Best balls, they're going at the end. And especially Pittman, who's a bit bigger with a smallish Hilton and a fairly small Campbell. I think he could see a lot of red zone targets. So I like getting both of those guys. We don't really know if both of them will do well. That's a lot of people with Jack Doyle coming back. But if you're drafting one or the other and they don't work out in your draft, you can always get rid of them for someone else on the waivers as well. So I think that it's a really fun team to draft and one that no one's really paying attention to right now.
I'm wondering, Alex, if they're going to pay attention to them in week 1 too, going up against the Jaguars. I know your rankings, you were very high on T.Y. Hilton this year. He's gone overlooked a lot this season. I've even heard people call him injury prone, which is egregious. He played 94 of 96 possible games going into 2019. Like, the guy is not injury prone. He had he dealt with an injury. That happens. But he had a 23% target share last year. It was his highest since 2016. There's really little reason to believe that he doesn't bounce back unless he gets hurt again, which is something you can't really predict. Where are you going with the Colts, knowing that you are pretty high on Hilton this season?
Yeah, I think that the Colts are definitely a passing offense I'm really excited about because with Andrew Luck on the team in 2018, the Colts threw more than 60% of the time. Then with Brissett, they dialed that back way down, became a rush first team where they ran the ball about 45 to 50%. But now they got a quarterback that can throw again. So I'm thinking it will go back up. In addition, Phillip Rivers, as Steve was saying, his yards per attempt weren't bad in LA. There were those games where he was on the big stage and didn't come up with the fourth quarter wins. All in all, pretty disappointing year for Rivers, but on a per play basis, he was solid. So I think that T.Y. Hilton is definitely going to be one of my favorite fantasy picks this year. Lafayette, I know you're kind of busting my balls when I released my initial rankings to you guys because I had T.Y. Hilton like way higher.
I think he was like 19.
Yeah, he was like one of the highest wide receivers. And if you go back a couple of years, I mean, this is a guy that would get close to 100 yards a game. So
I like him.
It's a ceiling.
Yeah. Here's what I think. Alex, I think this is going to be a team that has some really ugly games this year. And not to paint it with too broad a brush, but I also think it's going to be one of those teams that has some monster games this year because this is what Phillip Rivers has always done. And he gets everybody involved. So I don't know what we're going to get out of Pittman. I don't know what we're going to see out of Paris Campbell in year 2. Largely disappointing rookie season. But again, they really didn't focus the passing game much because they couldn't. Where do you stand on the backfield, though, with Marlon Mack coming off an 1,100-yard season in only 14 games, and then the Colts coming in and kind of surprisingly drafting Jonathan Taylor early in the second round? Jonathan Taylor is being drafted miles ahead of Marlon Mack this season. And even, on DraftKings, you look, Marlon Mack's 5,300, Jonathan Taylor's 5,700. So they're very closely priced, but their ADPs are there's a huge disparity in attention they're getting in season-long leagues.
Yeah, I mean, Jonathan Taylor is a really interesting fantasy football asset because the role is so open to improvement throughout the year. Because Marlon Mack is kind of the go-to runner, Naheem Hines is their third down back, and Jonathan Taylor could kind of steal the duties from both of them. And as far as week 1, I probably won't have him because I think they named Marlon Mack maybe the starter. I might be wrong about that. But I'm expecting all 3 of them to have roles during the first few games. Jonathan Taylor is probably the most talented, and he could earn a bigger role throughout the season. But I'm not banking on that at his ADP just because it is so high. But Steve, you're the Colts guy, man. So what's your take on this running back situation?
Yeah, I mean, I have a hard time drafting Mac in a season long or a best ball league because you're paying a pretty good price for him, and the most important time of the year is the playoffs, especially in a home league, because you should always when you're in a home league, your expectations should always be that you're going to make the playoffs. You're gonna your projections are gonna be good enough, and you can use some of the your activity on the waivers if not. So by the end of the year, Taylor is likely going to have surpassed Mac, and Mac will not be doing as well for you. So I have a hard time drafting Mac in a season-long league. I'll let someone else take him there. Kind of similar for Hines as well. He can get you some weeks that he'll be all right, but not super exciting. And then Taylor, I get the point. His ADP is very high, so a lot of his upside is already kind of built into the ADP. If I was going to choose any of them, I'm going to take Taylor, but probably not going to take any of them too much.
Steve, I'm fascinated by one team this season. Well, many teams, but there's one team that stands out to me that they've been hyped up for the past several years. I've largely stayed away from that. I get a ton wrong. Don't get me wrong. But this is one where I've been mostly right, and that's the Cleveland Browns. But when everyone's jumping off, I think I'm ready to jump on the post-hype bandwagon. Well, you know what? I'm driving that bandwagon, right? The Cleveland Browns are such a strange team. Last year, Odell Beckham was targeted top 10 in the league. He saw more deep ball attempts, 20-plus yards downfield, than everyone not named Kenny Golladay. Like, he got a ton of opportunity, just couldn't connect. Matter of fact, only 10 of his 35 deep attempts from Baker Mayfield were catchable. Jarvis Landry, Nick Chubb, Kareem Hunt, Austin Hooper, hell, David Njoku, if you want to throw him into the mix. And the defense that they've been building up through multiple first overall picks, second overall picks, several top 20 picks every year. I look at them with Kevin Stefanski taking over at head coach, at the helm for this Cleveland Browns team. I look at an offensive line that they've looked to solidify a little bit, drafted a lineman in the first round. Baker Mayfield probably isn't as bad as he was last year with 20 interceptions. I am buying into it because I think it would be shocking to see a team with this much talent struggle as much as they did last year. Maybe I'm wrong, but I do think there's going to be a lot of opportunity here that's going mostly overlooked. And it starts with 4th-round ADP and guys like Beckham. Baker Mayfield's going drafted well outside of the top 12 at his position. Where are you falling in on the Cleveland Browns, knowing what we've seen and knowing what we're projecting for them this year with a pretty stacked offense and pretty decent defense?
Yeah, I like the chances for the Browns as well. I think there's a couple of interesting things going on there. I'll start with the backfield if we can. I do have a couple of comments on the passing game too, but the backfield is one of the most interesting ones to me. So last year, Chubb was outstanding. He was even outstanding when Hunt came. Everyone thought, oh, Hunt was going to come and Chubb was going to fall off of the be worth nothing, but he continued. They had a role for both of them, and they both did their job. And you've seen that in the ADP so far this year, with Chubb being quite a bit higher and Hunt kind of below them. But I think one really interesting strategy that I like to take, and again, I'm always looking for playoffs is the game theory that I like to play, and who is going to help you the most in the playoffs. And so what I think of is Chubb is the back that's going to get you a lot of opportunities at the beginning of the year. He's going to have the most touches. He's going to have the most touches that are an injury risk. The biggest way for one of those two players to really break open a league and win you a championship is for one or the other to go down, and they will be that guy like Chubb was at the beginning of last year, like Hunt was back when he was loaned back in Kansas City. And Chubb is the one that's more likely to get hurt in that type of a situation. So at his ADP, I think Hunt is a great value for both best ball, for season long, and I'm really that's one that I'm really honing in on. From a passing game standpoint, I absolutely agree. I think some of those deep passes that Beckham and Mayfield didn't hook up on, they're going to more this year. It takes time for someone like Beckham to get acclimated to his new team, even if he is as good as Beckham. Wide receivers that change teams just take time, and Beckham was no exception. Mayfield has another year of getting better under his belt, and I think that those two will really hook up for a good year. That's probably going to take a little bit of a hit on Landry, as would Austin Hooper being added to the mix. So I think that there's a little bit of risk on Jarvis Landry's upside. He's just such a highly targeted guy that you're going to continue to see targets for him. And he may have one of the smaller standard deviations every week because he doesn't break open big plays the way some of these other players do, but he's always got a good floor for you.
Do you have a dissenting point of view on this, Alex? Looking at Cleveland Browns 2020 prospects?
I guess I have to because that's the name of the game here. So I agree with Steve about Kareem Hunt, that he's just got really high upside because he's being drafted in the 5th round on average. And he's the ultimate handcuff because if Chubb gets injured, you get a workhorse role, which only maybe 3 or 4 other guys can get. And that would be a league winner probably. And even if he doesn't get hurt, he's still in play to have big weeks every week because he's on the field a lot, regardless. So I think Chubb's a really good play. Hunt's a really good play. Chubb's someone I'm avoiding because he's getting drafted as if he's the workhorse, and it is a little bit more crowded this year. I'm just not high on Odell Beckham Jr. I think that when you look at players, like the previous year's performance is usually the best predictor of the future years, and he just didn't really separate himself from Jarvis Landry. Jarvis Landry may be a little bit underrated too. So the way I'm approaching these guys in season long is I think a lot of the value from Beckham and Landry comes if the other one gets injured, because when you have a couple talented receivers, that does spread the targets around a little bit more and makes the fantasy upside a little bit lower.
Oh, man. I like Beckham, man. I like him. He's dealt with some injuries. There's no question about that. But every year this guy has played a full season outside of last year, which I just think is going to be – I think it's an outlier. If I'm right about that, it's going to be great, Alex. If not, well, I'm probably going to take some hits because I have been drafting quite a bit of Beckham this year. I just think if 1,000 yards and 4 touchdowns is your floor, and being ignored here is 133 targets, which is still quite a bit in that offense. I'm willing to roll the dice on him having a bounce-back season because I think Stefanski and the offensive line are going to help Baker Mayfield. Although, to be fair, even with clean pockets last year and no pressure, Baker Mayfield struggled. Let's turn the page to another team here. Alex, I'll stick with you. We're talking about the Cincinnati Bengals. Joe Burrow coming in, first overall draft pick. He's the obvious starter. Andy Dalton is no more, backing up Dak Prescott in Dallas now. The Bengals have a lot of talent. I don't think there's any disputing that. A.J. Green, when he's healthy, is clearly an elite receiver. Tyler Boyd is another fantastic pass catcher. And Joe Mixon is somebody that people are very, very high on. I know you have a slightly different opinion on him this year, at least compared to his ADP. All in all, though, there is a lot of talent here. Much of that will be contingent upon whether or not Joe Burrow in his rookie season can make it work. And even Another thing, too, I'll just kind of throw a couple things at you and let you run with it. Another thing might be that the defense continues to struggle. They're often playing from behind, and even if Joe Burrow isn't accurate or particularly effective, he's still going to put up big numbers from volume alone. Where are you at on the Bengals this year from a DFS and a season-long standpoint?
I think the hype is way overblown because last year, well, first of all, I lost so much money on the Bengals last year in DFS because they threw at the highest rate in the league, and you'd think that would create a lot of variance and that like some of those times the passes would work and you get a big fantasy performance, and it never happened. So that was kind of disappointing. But the big change this year is with Joe Burrow. I just think that he runs the ball more than Andy Dalton did, and I think that is going to change the offense a lot into having a lot more running attempts than they did last year.
Does that mean you like him though?
I think he's probably fine, yeah, but like he's being drafted around the same as like Baker Mayfield, Aaron Rodgers, like Drew Brees, maybe a little bit lower than a couple of those guys, but people are drafting him like he's like a middle of the pack quarterback. And I just think the Bengals offense last year, to use your term, was dog shit. And not horse shit.
Not horse shit, dog shit.
Yeah. So I think that it's going to take time for that to work, even with a talented quarterback like Burrow. And I mean, how many times have we seen a hyped up number 1 draft pick that comes to the NFL and just is kind of underwhelming? So I just don't think the team will be good enough to really be a huge fantasy factor this year.
Steve, in PPR formats, feel free to put any spin on this you'd like. If you want to talk DFS season long, it doesn't matter. But Joe Mixon's ADP, talking season long here, is something that's kind of been in flux over the past few months. I saw him jump as high as 7th. Now I'm looking at it in PPR, 11th. Seen him out even in drafts I've done. I've actually seen him slip outside of the first a couple of times, which is crazy. It's very seldom you'll see that. Everyone's going running back heavy early on because it's such a deep receiver pool from top to bottom. But do you feel confident getting Joe Mixon in that like mid to late first round?
So first of all, she must have missed out on it. You must have gave up on Andy Dalton too early. Week 15, he was him and Fitzpatrick in the shootout of the year where they won all the tournaments.
That's right, not me.
So that was maybe that's how the Bengals will go this year. They'll carry that forward. For Mixon, I'm probably not on him as much at his price point. I mean, for years it's been everyone loves to hype up Mixon as this guy that's going to have this huge upside, but every year he kind of is a okay guy that isn't really a league winner or a week winner for you on DFS. So maybe Burrows opens that up for him a little bit more, especially the fact that Burrows is going to run a little bit more than what Dalton does. That tends to help a running back like Mixon. But I haven't really seen him be able to open it up enough that I'm willing to just say, hey, I'm going to spend my first round pick on a guy that has a pretty good floor, but not really a ceiling to be able to help me compete with the guys like Barkley or Zeke or somebody like that the guys that are picking first have. So if I'm going for someone late in the first round, I'm tending to pick either a higher upside wide receiver or someone that might have a little bit more upside in the running game, like Edwards-Helaire or somebody like that, possibly maybe Dalvin Cook as well. So that might have a little bit more upside, and especially in the passing game.
The last 4 games for Mixon last year is what I think vaulted him into that conversation of being a middle first round, late first round guy. I think he still probably would have been a late first rounder, but he did have those 3 huge game average, 5.4, 6.3, 6.2 yards per attempt in 3 of his last 4. Struggled against Miami, but his touch counts were through the roof, 20-plus carries in 4 straight. But I remember Zach Taylor running him out there for 25 attempts, even though even though they were down by 20. They kind of raised the white flag and just started giving Mixon a ton of attempts. I think he's going to be fine, but I do expect them to play from behind quite a bit. And how often will he be used in the passing game is also something that kind of concerns me, which is a bit of a perfect segue into this next team, Steve, the Philadelphia Eagles. Miles Sanders is actually someone, and I've been very open about this and pretty loud, as a matter of fact, that I'm drafting Miles Sanders ahead of Joe Mixon. And I know that you want to talk about contrary or contrarian type plays. This is one where I'm willing to take a stand, and it's this simple for me. I'll pass it off to you here. He racked up over 1,300 yards. Well, actually, sorry, he racked up 1,400 yards from scrimmage in his rookie season. He had 8 receptions of 20-plus yards, which was third behind only Eckler and James White, 2 guys that are featured heavily in the passing game. He's a legitimate guy that can run routes, like line him up as a receiver, line him up anywhere. And the argument that my problem with the argument that Doug Peterson doesn't run a single running back a lot, he doesn't use a bell cow. Give me one example of when he's had that opportunity. He came here first. It was Ryan Matthews, then LeGarrette Blount, clearly in the twilight of his career, Darren Sproles, Boston Scott, Wendell Smallwood, Jay Ajayi with the bad knees. I could go on forever. And then the Notre Dame guy, I always forget his name, who fumbled in a big spot against Houston. Miles Sanders is the type of guy that they drafted for the purpose of using as a bell cow back. Now, we can disagree on that. That's fine. But what I do know is when you take a guy in the second round and when Jordan Howard goes down over the final third of the season last year and Miles Sanders averages 21 looks per game, I just think the upside on a markedly better offense in the Eagles for Miles Sanders is super appealing to me. What do you think of the backfield with Philadelphia this year?
Yeah, I'm completely on board with you right there. I would also take Miles Sanders over Mixon. He's actually ranked a couple spots higher for me if I'm looking here at my rankings. So yeah, absolutely, I'm on the Miles Sanders train. I think everything that you said, I pretty much agree with. So it's hard for me to argue too much.
Sorry, I'm passionate about this one. I just run with it sometimes.
yeah, it's perfect. So you make a great argument, and I'm all on board with that. One thing that I think is interesting as you talk about the various bell cow backs and what will and won't work, I think Miles Sanders fits that very well. I think also what we saw when Miles Sanders did miss some time last year is we saw Boston Scott perform pretty well also. So Boston Scott's a really good handcuff for Miles Sanders in a season-long league. You can get him right at the end. And also even in a best ball league as well. I think Boston Scott is a guy that, if Miles Sanders ends up getting injured, he could be on the winning lineup at the end of the year because he's getting worked heavily. I mean, he had some games last year. He had 19 carries, like, for instance, in the final game of the year. He had 10 plus another 6 targets in week 13. So he certainly has plenty of potential to not quite be what Miles Sanders is, which is this late first round, early second round type guy. But he would be a very good performer.
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's nice to know that Peterson was not afraid to use Boston Scott at all in those situations. He single-handedly won that game for them against the New York. That's not fair. Carson Wentz had a pretty solid late game. But Boston Scott with 3 touchdowns, all rushing in that game. There's definitely upside there. I like him. I like the backfield because they're going to get worked in as pass catchers too. They really do incorporate a lot of pass catching running back stuff that is going to work well for them and not just dump offs. Alex, what are your thoughts on the Eagles offense this season? Alshon Jeffrey, apparently the Eagles are trying to trade him, but he's on the PUP list. It seems like he'll be out at least 6 weeks. If he remains on the physically unable to perform list. Deshaun Jackson's healthy. The only game he really played last year, he had 2 50-plus yard touchdowns to start the season against this same Washington team. And then you have Ertz, you have Dallas Goedert, but Jalen Reagor is out for a couple of weeks. He should be fine soon enough. Marcus Goodwin opted out. It's a kind of strange dynamic, but they are built on speed, this team. There's no question about it, in the backfield included.
Yeah, I like the Boston Scott call by you guys. One guy I've been drafting a little bit is Alshon Jeffrey because he's so low this year. Like, you can get him in one of the last rounds.
I've drafted him in the 16th, 17th round in redraft league.
Okay,
sure.
That makes me feel a little bit better because I feel like they don't have any good wide receivers. I mean, Deshaun Jackson, as you're saying, he played one game last year. He's also never a guy that can stay on the field the whole game. So I'm kind of looking at Jalen Reagor as an intriguing option as well. But really, I mean, this team, they run Ertz and Goddard a lot together, maybe out of necessity. That makes Goddard one of my best ball plays because it's a situation where Ertz, if he's out of the lineup, that just creates a lot more opportunities for Goddard. Maybe not like being on the field a ton more, but just having all those plays go to him instead of Ertz. So that's definitely one way I'm leaning in best ball. But man, week one's gonna be crazy because Jalen Reagor and Alshon Jeffrey both are probably out. So who's even gonna be starting at wide receiver? I have no clue.
Me neither. Don't Embiid my status just mentioned, and I did mention this briefly once we started talking about the passing game, that the Eagles are looking to trade Alshon. Maybe I mumbled it. I don't know. I definitely didn't state it as clear as possible. But yeah, they are definitely in. I don't know if they're in negotiations or trade talks, but they have thrown it out there that they're looking to make some moves, which could suggest that they feel really good about maybe one or two of these rookie wide receivers that they have. We won't spend a lot of time on them or really any at all, but I will throw names out there for those of you guys doing rookie drafts, dynasty startups. Like Quez Watkins is one of them. They said a lot of good things. John Hightower. Granted, you're going to hear this high praise for so many rookies and it never materializes into anything. But if you're looking to get rid of Jeffrey, knowing that Jackson is already aging, and maybe it's Greg Ward, but and Arcega-Whiteside apparently looks better, but there's got to be someone on this team that they feel good about in order to just completely part ways with a veteran in Alshon Jeffrey. So keep that in mind. Feel free to take some stabs on them. And even in best ball with 25 rounds, don't be afraid to take a couple of dart throws, maybe on one of these rookie receivers or second-year receivers for the Eagles. We've got about 15 minutes to go, Steve, so we can't get to everything. But I know there were a few teams that both of you guys were looking to talk about. So let me ask you this. What team do you think would be the most beneficial that we hit on right now, Steve, with maybe question marks or they're not being noticed as much as they should, or there's some hidden gems in there?
Let's see. I think the Las Vegas is pretty interesting one. I think one thing that I find interesting about Las Vegas is for your playoffs, for if you're playing in the best ball leagues, the playoffs are weeks 14 through 16, and that's typically the same that you see in most season-long leagues as well. And the Vegas has all of their games at home during that run. So I think that's a really interesting thing that might be a big bump up for Jacobs. So if they get a benefit, a lot of times you see running backs get benefit at home during the playoffs. So something that I think is going underlooked for Josh Jacobs and the Raiders potentially. Also, I think there's a lot of opportunity in the passing game with Tyrell Williams going on to the IR as well. So you have first rounder Henry Ruggs and third rounder Brian Edwards both in there that have some opportunities, as well as Hunter Renfrow coming off of a pretty solid year also. So you have three guys that all have pretty good upside. I mean, you don't get talented guys like a first rounder and a third rounder and a guy coming off of his first year that was overperformance, I would say, by most people's sense, and Renfrow all going late in your drafts. And the thing is with all those guys is if they don't succeed, they cost you so little that you can just dump them and get a guy off the waiver. And if you hit the guy that really succeeds, you're going to have yourself a guy that could be a potential wide receiver 2 or 3. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty. That's a huge thing in best ball, and definitely should take advantage of it, and even for your season-long leagues as well.
That's a great point that Steve brings up, Alex. To put it simply, uncertainty breeds opportunity in best ball for sure, because with the Raiders, who knows who it's going to be? Terrell Williams is done for the year. You've got Renfro. You have a number of young rookie receivers that might be able to put in some work. Henry Ruggs was the first receiver off the board this year in the draft. There's a lot of question marks. There's no doubt about that. What about some other teams that you think, because Steve just talked about the Raiders, what about a team like the Jets, where you have some guys, some veteran pass catchers, Jamison Crowder's still there, but then you bring in Brashad Perriman, who late in the season with the Bucs last season with Godwin and Evans out, really turned it on, had 3 straight 100-yard performances, 5 receiving touchdowns over his final 4 games. Really, really strong end to the season. Matter of fact, he had 70-plus yards in 5 straight games to close it out. You've got him on the Jets. You've got Crowder. You've got Denzel Mims, who might make an appearance. He said he'll be ready for week 1. What are your thoughts on this Jets offense? They're not getting a lot of attention, and I guess that's fair, but we really need to look at all of these teams, because sometimes you find a diamond in the rough on a team that doesn't really have a lot of certainty going into the season.
Yeah, I think the Jets are one of my favorite targets in season long because everyone is so cheap. And the bottom line is someone is going to put up some fantasy numbers on the Jets. And in the backfield, you got Bell, Gore, and Lamical Pirine. No one's kind of thinking Frank Gore is going to be a fantasy monster. And everyone's down on Le'Veon Bell, but I just feel like there's enough work for someone to come out of the woodwork here. So I think Bell is someone that the hype might be a little bit too low on. So I'm kind of excited about him because he's a guy that he catches a lot of passes. The rushing for the Jets last year was horrible. But
terrible.
Yeah, they got less than 4 yards per time. It wasn't even close, but they got a new offensive lineman, for what I understand. So I'm taking some chances on them. And then Perryman, Crowder, Mims, and Herndon. It's kind of the same thing Steve was saying with the Raiders, where none of them are being drafted very high. So I'm taking shots on them because someone's going to put up yards. Herndon is someone that's kind of interesting because he had a really good rookie year. Then he was out a whole year. Now he's coming back. He's fully healthy. They've named him the number 1 tight end. So I'm kind of intrigued by his potential this year.
There's a lot of uncertainty with the Jets, but again, it could be a good thing. I'm a little bit lower on Lev Bell than a lot of people, and it's not because I don't think he can have a solid season. It's because I'm actually higher on someone that's being drafted right around him in David Johnson. And Steve, before we close this up, we got about 8 or 9 minutes to go. I want to spend some time on the Houston Texans, who just, by the way, gave Deshaun Watson a monster $160 million 4-year extension today. So congratulations to him. I'm all over Houston this year. I've tweeted about this on numerous occasions that I believe one of Brandon Cooks or Will Fuller, assuming they stay healthy, will be in winning line, will win your leagues this year. Now, the reason for this is kind of simple. DeAndre Hopkins is gone. Talking about somebody that's a top tier receiver every single season, 150 plus target guy almost every single year. You're taking away a huge chunk of targets from this team. Look, he had 150 targets in 5 straight campaigns with Houston. Will Fuller, when healthy, is very productive. Brandon Cooks was another guy, multiple straight 1,000-yard campaigns. He's dealt with the concussions, but a matter of fact, he's only missed 2 regular season games since 2015. Had 4 straight 1,000-yard seasons, 114 targets or more in all of them. I just think these guys are very talented, and we're ignoring the fact that Deshaun Watson's being drafted as a top 5 quarterback. I know he has rushing upside, and that plays into it, but he's still a good player. He can still connect on the deep ball. He's still going to operate a solid, functioning offense. And Will Fuller and Brandon Cooks are being largely overlooked going in the 7th, 8th round. I've seen him go in the 9th round at times. And David Johnson is also being drafted after guys like Le'Veon Bell after a really disappointing season last year. So I just think it's still a big question mark as to where the production goes on this team. But there's so much opportunity in not knowing that, because there's a lot of real not raw talent, but a lot of talent on this team that could really work well and have some good synergy with Deshaun Watson.
Yeah, so I'll let Alex talk about David Johnson, because I know he's the David Johnson guy this year. So I'll talk a little bit about the passing game, though. Absolutely. So really 2.5 new players for the Texans offense. I say a half because Will Fuller always seems to miss time. So you got Cobb, Cooks, and Will Fuller. But what we've seen when Will Fuller plays, Hopkins is just a completely different player. So it was DeAndre Hopkins that commanded 40% of the targets all of last year, but it was Will Fuller that really changed the game for Watson. So if Will Fuller can stay healthy all this year, he definitely could have that upside to be a winner for your league, no doubt about it. I have no problem at all overpaying for him, and if you're getting him at his ADP, then he's definitely a great buy in both season long and best ball type leagues. If Fuller doesn't stay healthy, then you've really got Cooks that
could be huge.
Yes, he would be absolutely in a huge spot. I didn't see Cobb really performing. Basically Cobb last year ended up being like a name in a lot of ways, right? So he was kind of an afterthought in Dallas, and he didn't really perform as well as maybe what you were hoping for there. So there is a chance still that he does better here in this offense with Watson. But if Cobb is only okay and Fuller gets hurt again, all of a sudden you've got Cooks that right there. He could be the guy that is another type of guy that's a difference maker for you and really win the league for you. I do worry a little bit that Cooks is changing teams again. That anytime wide receivers change teams, it does take a little bit of time to get used to that new team. But the fact that they also have Cobb also changing teams and Fuller not having a 100% rapport, I think that'll hopefully ease the team change risk a little bit for Cooks. So I like that take, and I'm going to take some shots on those guys too.
Yeah, 86 ADP for Cooks this year. It's lunacy, especially if you're someone that believes Will Fuller is going to get hurt. You have to get Cooks everywhere if that's the case. Cooks has played with Drew Brees, Tom Brady, Jared Goff, and now Deshaun Watson. He's been pretty lucky with the quarterbacks he's gotten. Alex, David Johnson. Well, Steve said this is your guy. This is someone that we should be listening to you on. 38 ADP right now. He's going after Lev Bell. He's going almost a full round after Todd Gurley. Last year really bumped him down. He was a mid to high first round pick last season. Completely disappointed. And maybe he's one of these post-hype producers that we talk about so often. What do you think?
Yeah, I think he's worth taking a shot on because of his ADP being 50, because that allows you to take a really solid player earlier, and then there's not usually many running backs on the board at that point that are worth their salt. So having a guy like David Johnson helps a lot for your draft strategy. And they traded DeAndre Hopkins for him. I mean, plus a second round pick, but like that says it all. DeAndre Hopkins was one of the Texans' best offensive players, and I maybe there's other factors involved, but it definitely inspires a ton of confidence that the team has in David Johnson. I know at the end of last year he was really injured and he didn't perform particularly well, but when he was healthy, he had really good receiving numbers, more than 70 yards per target. And I mean, he can run too. The other factor is I think people always want Duke Johnson to do more than he does. I feel like the Texans never give Duke Johnson the playing time, and I don't see any reason to expect that to change. So that by default makes me think David Johnson is going to be on the field most of the time.
So, excuse me, week 1, 5 days away, 8 days away from real week 1, where we get into the Sunday football games, huge contest, even though DraftKings has a Millie Maker coming up. This is a spot where we wanted to break it. We wanted to take a zoomed out view here instead of just going strictly week 1 DFS, because we're going to do that all week long. Starting on Tuesday, the NFL strategy show is going to go all the way up into the weekend. We'll have NFL deeper dive again. Ben Rassa, Alex Baker, myself, Steve. Hopefully you'll be joining us this season as well. We'll have On the Contrary every single Saturday and a whole lot more. So this was more of just the primer on what we're looking at. We can't hit on everything because the MMA show is coming up next. Show them some love. Get those lineups in and check them out. They'll be starting in just a minute. Jason Floyd and Pete Rogers doing a great job there. And also be sure to check out our NFL product. We've got so much happening right now with NFL, more than we've ever done, because it's good through the 9th, right? It's good through Wednesday. We're giving away an $80 value for $38, and that's not including the $35 in FFPC credits that you get just for signing up with us. We're giving you 25% off your NFL monthly pass. That's a full calendar month of all of our premium DFS content, Alex's projections and ownership, all of the top tools that we use, that you use, that he uses to become such a good player, if you use the promo code SLEEPER at checkout. But that's not it. You get our entire fantasy football season-long best ball redraft package for free. The rankings, it's all data-driven. None of this groupthink nonsense. It's analytics, data-driven stuff, using that same model that made him a great DFS player and parlaying that into season-long to make some money there. And we already know that DFS right now, Best Ball and DraftKings has huge contests. FanDuel has it. FFPC, you'll get $35 free just by using this. That whole package is free, plus the 35, plus the 25% off our monthly pass for DFS. All you got to do is use the promo code SLEEPER at checkout. There's no reason not to jump in on this. And when you do, join us in our premium Slack chat. Say what's up. We'll be happy to show you around. We got a good group there. And before we go, Alex, I did just want to say a good friend of ours, a good friend of Awesemo, Uncle DFS, we knew him as Unc. We found out that he passed away the other day, and it's really sad news in the DFS community. Thoughts go out to his family and all of his friends. We're going to miss him.
Yeah, definitely, man. RIP, Unc. It's always crazy. We got such a great community with all these great people, and you never know much about them outside fantasy, but we lost a good one, so thoughts go out.
All right. Well, Steve, final thoughts here before we head out and toss this one over to the MMA guys.
Yeah, just can't wait for next season, or for next week, so that the season can get started up, and it's going to be a lot of fun. Hoping to take down some more showdown slates, some big tournaments and whatnot, and get some MMA lineups in. It's going to be a fun slate there as well.
Well, it won't be surprising when you do take them down. I think we can all agree on that. Same goes to you, Alex. Thanks to everyone hanging out. Before you leave, hit that thumbs up on your way out the door. It's greatly appreciated. It helps us combat that pesky YouTube algorithm, and allows us to continue doing shows for free here at youtube.com. Subscribe, hit the notification bell as well. We got so much coming up in the coming weeks, in the coming months. For Steve, Alex, myself, we'll see you back here next time. On the contrary, week 1 next Saturday, 3:30 Eastern time.